Something your grandmother prayed 40 years ago is about to happen. She may be gone, but her words never died. They have been traveling through time, gathering momentum, building force, waiting for the appointed moment when they would crash into your life like a wave that has crossed an entire ocean. And this week they reach their appointed shore. You may not remember the exact words she spoke. You may not have been present when she whispered them into the darkness of her bedroom, or cried them out in the kitchen while preparing meals for a family she loved more than her own life. But heaven remembers. Every syllable was recorded. Every tear that accompanied those prayers was collected. Every moment of faith she exercised on your behalf was deposited into a spiritual account that has been earning interest across the decades. There is a mystery in the way prayers move through time. They do not dissipate with distance or weaken with age. Instead, they gain power as they travel, accumulating authority through the faithfulness of the one who spoke them and the patience of the God who heard them. What your grandmother released into the spiritual atmosphere decades ago has been building momentum, gathering force, aligning circumstances, and preparing pathways that you could never have imagined. She saw this day before you were born. In moments of spiritual insight that came to her in prayer, she glimpsed fragments of your future. She saw challenges you would face and spoke protection over them. She saw opportunities you would encounter and prayed blessings upon them. She saw the person you would become and declared destiny over you when you were nothing more than a possibility in the mind of God. This is the nature of generational prayer. It transcends time, crosses seasons, and bridges the gap between what was spoken and what will be manifested. Your grandmother's words did not stop working when her voice grew silent. They intensified, they multiplied, they connected with other prayers, other promises, other declarations that had been made by those who came before her. What you are experiencing this week is not the result of a single prayer, but the culmination of generations of faith converging in a moment of divine timing. But here is what you must understand about the generational tide that is moving toward you. It carries more than blessing. It carries responsibility. It brings more than favor. It brings calling. The prayers that are being answered in your life were not spoken merely for your comfort or convenience. They were declarations of purpose, proclamations of destiny, and prophecies of assignment that are now demanding fulfillment. Your grandmother prayed not just for your happiness, but for your impact. She interceded not only for your success, but for your significance. She spoke over you not simply blessings of provision, but blessings of influence that would extend far beyond your own lifetime. And now those prayers are requiring a response. They are creating opportunities that demand action. They are opening doors that require courage to walk through. There are bloodlines that carry spiritual momentum, and there are bloodlines that carry spiritual resistance. Some families pass down patterns of breakthrough from one generation to the next, while others transmit cycles of struggle, limitation, and missed opportunity. The difference is not genetics or circumstance, but the prayers, declarations, and spiritual investments made by those who came before. Your grandmother understood this. She refused to allow the mistakes of the past to dictate the possibilities of the future. In her prayers, she broke cycles that had operated in your family line for generations. She dismantled patterns of lack, fear, and defeat that had been transmitted from parent to child like an unwelcome inheritance. She spoke new realities into existence, declared new outcomes, and established new spiritual precedents that would govern the lives of those who came after her. What you are experiencing this week is the manifestation of that spiritual restructuring. But the generational tide brings not only what she prayed for, but also what she prayed against. The very forces that she resisted in her intercessions are being exposed and expelled from your life. Spiritual oppositions that have operated in your family for decades are meeting their match in the prayers that were spoken long before you encountered them. What seemed like overwhelming challenges in your present are being met by overwhelming spiritual resources that were prepared in the past. Your grandmother's prayers were not generic requests for blessing. They were specific intercessions tailored to the unique challenges and opportunities she foresaw in your future. She prayed about relationships before you met the people who would shape your life. She interceded for your career before you knew what work you would do. She spoke protection over your health before you faced any illness. She declared victory over your battles before you even knew there would be warfare. This is why the timing of the generational tide is so precise. It does not arrive randomly, but at the exact moment when what she prayed about becomes relevant to your circumstances. The spiritual realm operates with perfect timing, releasing resources when they are needed, manifesting promises when conditions align, and activating breakthroughs when readiness meets opportunity. What your grandmother set in motion decades ago is arriving now, because now is when it serves your destiny. But the generational tide also carries the weight of expectation. Your grandmother's prayers were not spoken into a vacuum. They were invested with the hope that they would produce a return, that they would yield fruit, that they would accomplish something significant in the earth. Her intercessions were acts of spiritual investment, and every investment expects a return. What is manifesting in your life this week is not just blessing to be enjoyed, but responsibility to be stewarded. There are assignments hidden within the answers to your grandmother's prayers, purposes embedded in the provision that is being released, callings concealed within the opportunities that are opening. She did not pray simply for you to be blessed, but for you to be a blessing. She interceded not only for doors to open to you, but for you to become a door for others. Her prayers were strategic investments in the kingdom of God made through your life. Consider the sacrifices she made to create the spiritual foundation you are now standing on. The times she chose prayer over sleep, intercession over entertainment, spiritual discipline over personal comfort. The meals she prepared while her heart was heavy with concern for family members she might never see again. The quiet moments she stole away to whisper your name to heaven, believing that somehow her words would make a difference in a future she would never see with her own eyes. Her faith was not theoretical. It was practical, persistent, and powerful. She believed in the power of prayer not because it was a religious duty, but because she had seen it work. She had witnessed impossibilities become realities through intercession. She had watched heaven respond to the cries of a faithful heart, and what she had experienced in her own generation, she determined to secure for yours. The generational tide that is moving toward you this week carries the fragrance of her faithfulness, the force of her persistence, and the authority of her love. Every wave that breaks over your circumstances bears the imprint of her intercessions. Every blessing that manifests in your life carries the signature of her prayers. Every door that opens, every obstacle that moves, every breakthrough that occurs can be traced back to words she spoke when you were nothing more than a hope in her heart. But generational prayers do not work automatically. They require recognition, reception, and response. You cannot passively receive what previous generations actively prayed for. The tide brings resources, but you must gather them. It brings opportunities, but you must seize them. It brings breakthroughs, but you must walk through them. Your grandmother's prayers created possibility, but you must create reality. This is why this week is so crucial. The generational tide has a window of opportunity during which its power is at its peak. Miss this moment, and the tide recedes, carrying its resources back into the spiritual realm to await another season of alignment. But recognize this moment, respond to it appropriately, and you step into a dimension of blessing that has been building momentum across multiple generations. There are signs that confirm the arrival of the generational tide in your life. Sudden opportunities that seem to appear from nowhere. Unexpected favor from people who have no natural reason to bless you. Resources becoming available just when you need them most. Doors opening that you did not even know existed. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations that the prayers of your ancestors are being answered in your present circumstances. You may also notice internal shifts that signal the arrival of generational blessing. Courage rising in areas where you once felt intimidated. Clarity emerging in situations that previously confused you. Confidence building in places where insecurity once dominated. These changes are not random personal growth. They are the result of spiritual inheritance being activated, generational strength being transferred, and ancestral faith being imparted to your spirit. The generational tide also brings healing to broken places in your family line. Wounds that have festered for decades begin to close. Relationships that seemed irreparably damaged begin to restore. Communication patterns that had become toxic begin to transform. Cycles of hurt, disappointment, and misunderstanding that had repeated from parent to child begin to break. What your grandmother prayed for in terms of family restoration is beginning to manifest not only in your individual life, but in your entire family system. But with the arrival of generational blessing comes generational responsibility. You are not just the recipient of what previous generations prayed for. You are now the steward of what they invested. The prayers that are being answered in your life create an obligation to pray for those who will come after you. The breakthroughs you experience establish a precedent for future generations. The victories you win become the foundation for battles your children and grandchildren will face. Your grandmother understood that prayer is not just about solving present problems, but about shaping future possibilities. She interceded not only for her immediate concerns, but for challenges and opportunities that would arise long after her voice had been silenced. Now you stand at the same crossroads. What you do with the generational blessings being released this week will determine what resources are available to those who come after you. There are moments in family history that become turning points for entire bloodlines. Moments when the trajectory of a family line shifts from decline to increase, from struggle to breakthrough, from limitation to expansion. This week represents such a moment for your family. The generational tide that is crashing into your life has the power to reset the spiritual climate of your entire lineage, establishing new patterns of blessing that will flow to your children, your grandchildren, and generations yet unborn. But turning points require decisions. They demand responses. They insist on action. The generational tide brings momentum, but momentum without direction becomes chaos. You must choose how to channel the force that is being released. You must decide what to do with the opportunities that are opening. You must determine how to steward the resources that are becoming available. The choices you make this week will echo through generations. Your grandmother's prayers were acts of faith that reached across time to influence circumstances she would never see with her natural eyes. Now her faith is being rewarded with answers that exceed her original requests. What she prayed for in hope is being manifested in reality. What she declared in darkness is being revealed in light. What she spoke in weakness is being confirmed in power. The generational tide carries not only blessing for you but vindication for her faith. This is why the arrival of generational blessing often feels overwhelming. It carries the accumulated weight of decades of prayer, the collected force of years of faith, and the concentrated power of persistent intercession. You are not just receiving what you need for your immediate circumstances, you are inheriting what has been building across multiple generations. The magnitude of what is being released corresponds to the magnitude of what was invested. Some families leave their children money, others leave them property. But the greatest inheritance any generation can pass down is spiritual momentum, the force of faith that has been building across decades of prayer, worship, and obedience. What your grandmother left you is not measured in dollars or assets, but in spiritual resources that cannot be taxed, stolen, or diminished. And this week, that inheritance reaches full maturity. The generational tide that arrives this week also brings with it divine connections that were established before you were born. People your grandmother prayed you would meet, relationships she interceded for you to have, partnerships she declared would form to advance your purpose. These connections may seem to arise naturally, but they are the result of supernatural orchestration that began decades ago. What appears to be coincidence is actually the manifestation of intercession. As the generational tide reaches its peak in your life, you may experience moments of profound gratitude mixed with overwhelming responsibility. Gratitude for the faithfulness of those who came before you and invested in your future. Responsibility for stewarding what they have passed down and ensuring that it multiplies rather than diminishes. This tension between gratitude and responsibility is the hallmark of generational blessing. It humbles and empowers simultaneously. The wave that crashes over your life this week carries within it the echoes of every prayer your grandmother ever whispered on your behalf, every tear she shed in intercession for your future, and every moment of faith she exercised when circumstances suggested that hope was foolish. What seemed like silence from heaven was actually preparation time, allowing power to build, resources to accumulate, and timing to align perfectly. Your grandmother may not have lived to see this week, but she is witnessing its unfoldment from a realm where all prayers are visible and all faith receives its reward. The generational tide that breaks over your circumstances this week is her legacy, her love letter written in the language of intercession, and her final gift to a future she helped create through the persistence of her prayers. Now it is your turn to step into the momentum she created, to steward the blessings she secured, and to continue the cycle of generational blessing by speaking into the lives of those who will come after you. The tide has arrived. The wave is breaking. The answers are manifesting. This is your grandmother's week to be vindicated, and your week to be transformed. But transformation requires participation. The generational tide brings power, but you must harness it. It brings opportunity, but you must act upon it. It brings breakthrough, but you must walk through the openings it creates. Your grandmother's prayers established possibility, but your faith must establish reality. There are specific things your grandmother prayed about that are reaching their appointed time of fulfillment this week. Financial provision that seemed impossible is becoming accessible. Relationships that appeared broken beyond repair are showing signs of restoration. Health issues that had persisted are encountering divine intervention. She understood something about the nature of blessing that many miss. True blessing is not individual, but generational. It does not stop with the person who receives it, but flows through them to influence everyone connected to their life. The breakthrough you experience this week is not just for you. The timing of this generational tide is not accidental. It arrives at the moment when you have developed the spiritual capacity to steward what is being released. Your grandmother's prayers contain not only requests for blessing, but intercessions for wisdom, character, and maturity. This week marks the beginning of a new chapter in your family's story. What starts with you does not end with you. The generational tide that lifts your life creates momentum that will carry forward to influence the lives of your children and their children. Your grandmother's prayers are being answered not just in your individual circumstances, but in the broader context of your family's destiny. Ancient promises that seemed forgotten are being remembered. Old prophecies that appeared unfulfilled are reaching their appointed time of manifestation. The wave that breaks this week carries with it the accumulated faith of every believing ancestor who ever spoke your name to heaven, declared blessing over your bloodline, or interceded for the success of future generations. What appears to be sudden breakthrough is actually the culmination of sustained spiritual investment. As you recognize and respond to the generational tide this week, remember that you